We are back with another episode of the Do As I Say, Not As I Did podcast. And again, the name says everything. This is what you should do, and you should learn from what we did wrong the first time. So we made a lot of mistakes, and we're kind of sharing that advice throughout this podcast. Each week I bring on different founders or just smart people in general, product experts, people from Canva, Atlassian, people who've had massive businesses, sales gurus, futurists, anyone that is really smart that knows how to build business as well. We're bringing them on to help us unpack all the different nuances and challenges within businesses so that you can learn from our mistakes. So if you do have any questions or challenges you're going through in your own startup, send me an email and we'll workshop it on the podcast. So send those emails through to podcast@joelditrapani.com. Now, again, that is a hard name to spell. So check the show notes and I'll put it in the show notes if you want to send us an email. I'm your host, Joel Ditrapani, and I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Igo, which is an edtech scale-up. We've been growing it through Australia and the UK, and now I've moved to the US because the US is the promised land, and now we're fully focused over here. On top of that, I'm also an advisor and a coach in the product space. So, I'm really passionate about the product space. I made a lot of mistakes when I first got into the product world. So I'm trying to help startups and businesses learn how to build and run great product teams, which subsequently means, they can build great products that people actually want to use. And today, I'm super excited to be joined by my friend Tanmay Jain. Tanmay is the founder of Quokka, which is the first stop for movies and TV shows by combining the powers of social and AI. But I will let Tanmay explain that because I really love the platform, but no one pitches like a founder. So on top of this, very cool TV media platform that I love and that's been getting a lot of traction recently, Tanmay has actually got one of the most insane resumes that you could imagine in the product space. So Tanmay was before at Atlassian, Amazon, and Canva, building and leading product teams. So we've all used those platforms. We know that Tanmay led those products, so we know that Tanmay can build really cool shit. In that kind of time, he also won the Apple App of the Year award and the Product Hunt Golden Kitty. So he also has the credentials to prove that. And on top of all of this, Tanmay is a huge foodie and a giant coffee snob, which I know for a fact is a hard thing to do when you're in London because they have terrible coffee. So Tanmay is an expert product manager and an expert product lead. So let's jump into it. Welcome, mate. Thank you for coming on today.
No, thanks for having me on and thanks for the kind words. I am absolutely stoked to be on the pod today. I think we're going to really get into it and I'm keen to just have a really casual chat between us. I think we were chatting before the call a little bit and we're saying that these are things that you and I just naturally shoot the shit on. And so I'm excited to kind of bring that onto the pod and hopefully people find it useful.
Yeah. Tanmay and I call each other regularly just with these kind of problems in our own businesses. So I'm really excited to kind of get this on camera. But before we jump into those questions, tell us a little bit more about Quokka.
Yeah, look, Quokka is really simple. The problem is something that we all get. We sit down to relax. We have 2 hours to relax and we're like, hey, let's watch something on Netflix, Disney Plus or Prime. We can never find anything great. So we scroll around for 30 minutes and then we look for something else. We end up watching The Office for the 1000th time, which usually happens in my household. And so what we're really trying to do is just make it easy to find content you truly love. And we do that through a bunch of different ways. We're starting with social recommendations. Now AI is all the buzz, but we found out that we have a bunch of great data and we're actually bringing on an AI and ML layer on top of it. And then where we really want to go is the big vision is actually to be the OS for entertainment, so the operating system of entertainment. And that's really driven by what we've seen in the market right now where, there's Screen Actors Guild is kind of on strike and there's a bunch of different things happening there. And we think that there's a great opportunity to redefine the economic and business model of the entertainment industry. And so, yeah, that's what we're doing with Quokka, but starting with a very small and easy problem of, hey, let's find something great to watch right now.
I love it, man. I've been using the chatbot a lot recently to try and find stuff to watch because every time I finish a show, I'm just filled with dread of just what can my wife and I find to watch together because, where those two Venn diagrams overlap, it's a thin layer, it's a thin overlap. So finding something is challenging and I love having a platform to help me with that. But I don't know if your pitch works because I love watching The Office for the 1000th time. So, if you're finally sick of The Office and you want something else, then you go to Quokka. But if you're down for The Office, that's what Quokka often recommends me because I think it knows me a little bit too well at this point.
Yeah, it's funny. We found that, and this is probably getting a bit deep into it, but a lot of your content falls into two categories. You've got your workhorses So you've got The Office, Parks and Recreation, these kind of like syndicated sitcoms. But then like you actually have these things called the show ponies, and these are the things that bring people in and drive a buzz and drive signups. And those are kind of like, the likes of your Squid Game. And so yeah, we totally get that like things like The Office have value. And you know what? I don't get me wrong, I was watching New Girl before hopping on the call and having lunch. And so that's
That's another
completely
banger.
yeah, great banger. Like I love Nick. But there's a space for that, but there's also space for finding great new content that's engaging as well.
Yeah, I love it. The recommendation it gave me recently was The Bear, and I love that. I binged the whole thing in a weekend. So
Isn't the
yeah.
bear literally like I was watching like season two and it felt literally like doing a startup, like the
Oh
exact
yeah, it's
right.
stressful,
And
man.
there's that moment where like everything's kind of happening and he's kind of separated. Not to reveal any spoilers, and I was like, that would be me exactly, like just having an emotional breakdown over there. So like it's
Yeah.
completely it captures it so well.
Emotional breakdowns have a huge overlap in that Venn diagram with startups. Well, look, speaking of emotional breakdowns, that's kind of a good segue into our first question. There's borderline emotional breakdown going on here. So, hey, you. Yeah, I'm talking to you, Ryan. I don't know. I was kind of just hoping that Ryan Trahan was listening and this is all for him. Anyways, I'm interrupting this obviously incredible advice to talk to you, Ryan, or to talk to any of you who are listening, because my advice is even more important than normal, and that advice is to get Miro. This episode is brought to you by Miro because they are the sponsor, and because I use Miro to plan the whole podcast, so it's kind of like this whole episode is double brought to you by Miro. I may have mentioned before, but Miro is not just a simple digital whiteboard. Miro's capabilities run far beyond a digital whiteboard. It's a visual collaboration tool where the whole team can use this to build on each other's ideas and to create something together meaningfully from anywhere in the world. Now, as always, I like to tell you something particular in Miro that I like, that I've discovered in the last week. And this week, I've really been enjoying the inbuilt voting system. So when you're running your next workshop, go up to the top right-hand corner of the screen. This is my right. Go to the apps section and click on the voting button. Now, this icon kind of looks like a square with a circle in the middle of it and a circle on the outside. I'll be honest, it's not a great icon, but I can't think of a better one, so it's fine. But once you click that, it actually lets you select a region on the board, it lets you select the items within that region, actually set up a full voting system for everyone who's actively in your board. So this is a super useful way to get votes on like what's the best outcome, what's the best option, on do they like this sticky note best or this one best, and it allows you to get input from your whole team and allows you to get buy-in from your whole team, whether it's something that you're designing, whether it's a strategy, or whether it's like some kind of budgeting exercise. Now, voting obviously makes sense, but I like having this inbuilt because it's a way for me to it's kind of like a secret hack I use to help get more input from the quieter people in my team. Now, everyone obviously knows what I think all the time. I'm loud and I have a podcast because I love spruiking my opinions. But I love this as a way to capture feedback across my entire team and not just from the people with the loudest voices. So try it out. Try the voting system. I think it's super neat. Anyways, as always, get Miro. If you sign up today, you'll get your first 3 boards free forever. So sign up at miro.com/podcast. And because I talk slow, I'm going to spell it out as always. miro.com/podcast. And I'm going to trust you can spell podcast. All right, back to the advice. This first question today is called I'm Quitting. I'm the founder and CEO of a subscription management billing system startup. That's a mouthful. We took a plunge thinking we'd make waves, only to barely cause a ripple. Our launch, more of a belly flop than a perfect dive. For everyone sending in stuff, I love analogies, so please, lay them on thick. And it's things, watching the big boys continue their swim while we're just treading water. We've thrown everything but the kitchen sink at this. Conferences, networking, social media blitzes, you name it. But our startup's still gasping for air. We're battered, but not broken yet. A question has been nagging me. Are we just fighting a losing battle? Should we throw in the towel or keep swinging? That's where you guys come in. Have you been in this ring before? Did you step out or stick it out? I need your stories, advice, and brutal honesty. Should we stay or should we go? This one's by Saxon188.
Wow.
That is a hard place to be.
Phew.
That is a really hard place to be.
I think like everyone talks about financial runways. I think the runway that no one ever talks about is emotional runway. And this guy sounds like, or whoever this is, Saxon188, sounds like they're at the end of their emotional runway. I think that that's I know Joel, you've probably been there. I've told you about the times I've been at the emotional runway. And it is a really, really tough spot to be in. I think that oh man, you have to start with like, why did you even get into this space? Right? Like with Quokka, there's been a million and one competitors that have come and gone before I was there. There's many well-funded startups that started around the same time that I did that have now pivoted away. Um, and the question you have to ask yourself is like, why did I get into this race to begin with? Because that's really what a startup is. Like, why did I get into this game? Why did I get into this race? And for me, what I looked at was like, this problem is not solved. And the fact that there's so many competitors getting into this and they're succeeding or not succeeding means that there's an opportunity yet to be solved in this space. And when you start thinking about it that way, then you get all these more like, it almost becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy, where I was saying like early this year, you know, the entertainment industry is completely messed up. The economic model is broken. Then lo and behold, you get like, 100 days of Screen Actors Guild strikes. And I go, wow, that's the motivation I needed. That drives me forward, because you know what? It just gives me even more conviction in it. And so I think like what's really deep, like what you first should go and do is understand, why did I get into this? And is that like personal desire, motivation, whatever it is, does that still hold true? Put aside all the other noise and metrics and everything. Go after that first.
Yeah. I've actually never heard that term before, but I love that that newly patented term by Tanmay, which is emotional runway. It fluctuates just like financial runway. You know, like a new investment round gives you more cash, gives you more, emotional energy to kind of ride off as well. So I love that term, and there is only limited emotional runway. You know, you can't run at a problem that's not working forever. You know, it just doesn't happen. If it's not going to work, it doesn't work. So, yeah, I think that's a really interesting conversation. I'd actually love to have a whole episode focused on that. And I'm going to steal that term, Tanmay, and I'm going to use it all the time. I love it. I guess like one thing I was hoping to share, Tanmay, is that on this idea, like there are hard moments in startups, and Saxon sounds like he's at a really tough point right now, and I think there are ways that he should move forward, but people go through this. I've definitely been through it. And I know that there's this one story of yours, and I hope you don't mind me telling this, Tanmay. But yeah. This is where I guess Tanmay and I really bonded, because I've been in the same situation. But Tanmay told me, hey Joel, I had a bad week last week. I was at like the grocery store, and I just wanted like a Snickers bar or something like that. And he's just like, I had a shit day, nothing was working, and I just wanted a Snickers bar. And then I get there and there's no Snickers bar, and I just break down crying in the middle of a grocery store because of a Snickers bar. And like, I think that's like such like, it's so awesome that you shared that, but just like, I've been there. Like there's been times, I
feel like you have those moments where like a lot of a startup, and I feel like especially in the early days until you get like product market fit and you're running, you feel like you're not just pushing a rock uphill, you're pushing like a rock upstream. And the only thing that's really keeping you going is like your motivation. And so, yeah, I had this moment, and this is back when I was like solo as well. And we're trying to go deep into like, trying to potentially raise some funding, and that wasn't working out. And I just moved to London, and it was a new city, and none of my friends were ever awake when I was awake. And yeah, I just got to a day where I was like, you know what? I'm just going to reset. I'm going to go to the grocery store. I'm just going to get a bar, and I'm just like, and that's going to be it, and it's going to be fine. And it was a new cities, and it was a new grocery store, so it took me like 20 minutes longer than it really should have to find the aisle and find the corner. And then it just like, yeah, completely fell apart. And I think that moment was when I realized, hey, like this thing, what you're trying to do is like will something into existence is actually really, really, really hard and difficult. And there's a lot of BS media paraphernalia about like the one moment where things succeed. But I remember like Brian Chesky did this like Twitter post a couple of weeks back where he's like, we launched Airbnb 3 times before anyone, like we actually launched successfully. And that's what no one ever really talks about, is like up until these like beautiful moments, like these one-off sort of moments that change the trajectory of your startup, and if you really, really succeed, become part of startup law. Before that, there's a million and one like almost failed moments. One of the cool communities I've been able to be part of is like Mark Randolph, who's the co-founder of Netflix. And one thing he talks about is when you talk about Netflix law, there's this kind of supposed car ride between him and Reed Hastings, and they talk about this concept of like, hey, Blockbuster has late fees, and there's DVDs, and there's this moment that like was like aha, and then they send a DVD to themselves, and they're like, okay, we've got Netflix, and supposedly they're off to the races. In reality, that was something like 6 different events over the course of 2 years, and a bunch of burned money, and I think even potentially like a mini round of layoffs. And
Yeah.
so like no one ever talks about like actually what happens before, and before is a lot of failure, a lot of hard bits, and a lot of like straight up like worse than I think things not succeeding is just straight up apathy, right?
Yeah.
And you've got to it's part of the game, it's part of the race, to be honest. I still have moments like that,
Yeah.
every day, every week, and it is super painful. But I think I wanted to touch on like, I know we talked about emotional runway and going deep into, why you started this, whatever you were working on. I think subscription billing management. Yeah, that is a mouthful. Subscription billing management. And what I wanted to dive into is like, hey, things aren't really taking off, and should we stop and should we change? And like, frankly, we just had that with Quokka. So with Quokka, we had this whole moment where we're trying to build like a social network initially around movies and TV shows. And we have a really great insight around what engagement looks like and how to make that happen, but we weren't really growing meaningfully. And so we kind of had a moment where we're like, well, something's going to change, right? And we've completely pivoted our course of action, and now we're seeing almost great growth where we went from like one person signing up maybe a week to 280 in the last like 11 days, to a new product that we're kind of building. And so I think what you should really evaluate is like, if you're going to keep doing the same thing and expecting different results, that's the what's that line, that's the definition of lunacy, or
Yeah. Definition of insanity, I think.
that's right. So I would really try and think about like what's going to change. And maybe that's you try something completely new. Maybe you introspect deeply and go, hey, I actually don't care about subscription billing management. You got to find your like core purpose. I don't know. What do you think, Joel?
Yeah. I think, this is a hard situation to be in. And Saxon, you're not alone, man. Like, Tanmay's been there. I've definitely been there. There's been times where I've just thought like, this is doomed. I'm done. I've had enough. And it's because, this is a near impossible task. A 1 in 1,000 work. And maybe this is the end of your business. What I would say is that whatever you're doing right now isn't working, so it needs to change. But that's okay. Startups are constant change. You need to continually pivot, continually change, and iterate and innovate. So, what you're doing right now isn't working. That doesn't mean that the business is dead, though. You've got a customer you're trying to serve, a value that you believe that you can create. You just need to keep on tweaking it until you find that right fit. But the big and that is definitely possible. You can build anything with product, and if you just find the right person with the right problem, who has the right kind of like authority, you'll win, absolutely win. But do you have the emotional runway to achieve that? That's actually what you need to decide. And I do love that term. Like, I once had this founder tell me, he said, he just quit his business, and he said he made a decision 12 months before that if we don't achieve X and Y by that date, then he was going to step out. And, that was just a pact with himself. He said, this is what I need to see to keep on going. And for these things to be true, that's worth my time. And so that's what I recommend. Like, work out how much emotional runway you have left. Maybe the right thing to do is to just step away now. Maybe this isn't for you anymore. Maybe this idea isn't for you and you just can't keep going. Maybe you got 6 months, maybe you got 12 months, but work out what needs to be true for you to stay here. What needs to be true for you to have that emotional runway to keep going indefinitely. Like, what kind of growth do you need to see, or investment or whatever. And then if those things are true, stay in the business. But if they're not true, then you should step away. Because if you're not in it and you don't want to be there, you're not going to succeed. You need to be giving this everything. You need to be energized, and you need to have like this crazy unhinged energy to run a startup. And if you can't have that, then you should step away. But give yourself some time and understand what you need to see to get that energy back, or not, and then step away.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like setting emotional milestones is really important. It's something we did a lot of where we set like literally 6 week milestones of like, we want to be here and this is what we need to see to revalidate. And it's funny because we did have a point where we soul searched and like, should we even continue working on Quokka or should we pivot away to something else? And we, at the end of it, it was great because it almost galvanized us because we went through those milestones and we hit those goals and it was like mind-blowingly amazing. I think the final little note I'd love to leave this on is you were not your startup as well. Like, I don't know, Joel, if you had that moment. I had a moment like a couple months into my journey where I was like, I am not my startup. Because imagine like if you tie your whole self-being, and frankly, you do tie a lot of your energy and attention into your startup. But if you tie your whole self-being into a startup, startups are brittle. I mean, like you said, 1 in 1,000 succeed. If you're a consumer social product like we were trying to be, one day your metrics are up, one day your metrics are down. That's a really bad way to define your emotional state and your emotional well-being. So you've also got to like kind of have a safe detachment because when you do that, you're also willing to kind of you make better decisions because you have a kind of that dispassionate sort of distance from it.
I think that's good advice, and it's advice that I struggle to follow still. You know, my identity is so locked up in Vigo.
I mean, that's but do as I say, right? Like, it's not do as I
yeah, yeah, exactly. Do as I say, not as I'm doing right now. That's a good point. All right. Well, let's wrap this one up with a final judgment. So if we're just to kind of bring that all back together, it sounds like we're saying, hey, it's tough. We get it. But you need to work out why you started this and what it's going to take for you to keep going. Work out how much emotional runway you have left and give yourself some metrics, you know, some emotional checkpoints. Is it 3 months, 6 months? Work out how much longer you want to give it and give it everything, and then walk away. Keep going, or walk away knowing that you gave it everything you want and you didn't see what you needed to.
Yeah.
All right. So Tanmay, give me a hand here. I'm trying to work out how to close off questions. So
okay.
I'm taking pictures from my guests. So you've been advised. Do as I say. Amen. Hoorah. How do we want to sign them off?
Yeah, do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah,
maybe.
do as I say. Okay.
Do as I say. I like that.
Do as I say, Saxon. You have to do this now. That's a fact. All right. Okay. We'll move on to question number 2. This one is called Giving Away My Equity. I want to bring my current programmer into my startup. I've been working with him for a couple of months and he's genuinely enthusiastic about the project and we've just shipped our MVP. He's also made significant updates to the app and our working relationship has been great so far. Currently, I own 100% of the company. I'm considering offering him a share of the company while continuing to fully pay him for the work he does. Should I do this? From Gman2520. I thought this was a good question, Tanmay, because I think you were in a similar position to this.
Yeah, Gman2520. Been here, exactly done that. Like I come from being pretty non-technical. I've learned to code since I started my startup because I was like, I have to be on the tools and be able to do things. What you're talking about really is people say fancy terms like ESOPs, which is an employee share option pool for your like employees, whatever. What you're really talking about is like, how do I incentivize and align those incentives with the people around me, right? And so I had a position where I had a bunch of people who were involved, maybe building things, and I couldn't necessarily afford to keep paying them. So my next question was, how do I bring you into the fold and incentivize you and get you psyched about working here? And the first question you need to ask is this person an early employee or a co-founder? Because there's a very subtle but a big gulf of difference between the two. An early employee, like if you just talk about equity, an early employee might get 1.5%, 2%, depending on where they come in the journey. A co-founder, according to YC's definition, has at least 10%. So you're talking like a 10x difference from an equity perspective. What you're also talking about is a gulf of difference between how much responsibility and energy and thing they put into the startup. Because you're effectively going to be wed. If they're a co-founder, you're going to be wed to this person for at least 10 years if things really succeed. And so you want to make sure that person is a good emotional fit, raises the bar, can take you to where your startup is not just right now, but where it needs to go in the next 5 years even. And then at that point, if you've decided that this is the right person to be a co-founder or be an early employee or be your first engineer, then I think you kind of shouldn't be stingy at all. So like with a co-founder, even though I'd put some money in, we went even Stevens basically, because it was really important to me that, hey, this is my co-founder, we're in this together. And for them to feel incentivized and feel like they've got a meaningful stake and that they want to work on it, we need to be basically on an equal footing. And you know what? Like, my Jake made this really funny line when we're like on matching luxury yachts potentially, like 10 years from now. Will we really care about that 2%? Probably not, right? And that's true for like an employee as well. So right now we're looking at bringing on like our first marketing person purely through an equity plan. And we sat down and we had this moment where we wrote out this full regime based on how should we split it up, and if they achieve these sort of milestones on socials, we'll give them this much. And then we kind of took a step back and went, we're being way too stingy, because if the upside is there, the upside is massive, like obscenely massive, life-changing amounts of money. And so a little percentage here or there really makes no difference if that means that it's going to guarantee success or really raise the chances of success because you've aligned incentives. And so I think you shouldn't be stingy at all. Technically, this can be a hard thing to do, and I think Joel's probably got more experience in that. But my opinion is don't be stingy with equity, but don't also willy-nilly give it out to advisors.
Yeah, absolutely. Like throw the equity around, man. Like if this person is co-founder material, give them the equity. If they're first employee material, give them the equity. Like my wife and I say this all the time: 100% of zero is zero. So, if you keep 100% of your equity, but you don't have the right incentivization and you're not able to ship product fast enough or iterate fast enough or get the right customers, it doesn't matter, You're just burning a hole in your own pocket. So I would absolutely make a deal where everyone feels really incentivized. I love even co-founders. I actually think that's the best way to do it. And I think there's some nuances in here, but definitely be generous. If you can get to a version of 50-50, I would do a version of 50-50 as well. If they're just looking at being an early co-founder, give them a couple of percent for sure. But I would recommend, if you're looking at giving out equity, read Matt Mashari's The Great CEO Within book, because it talks really specifically about how to price equity and give equity to employees. But it's all about like how much are they earning, how much is that below market rate, and then how much is your company going to be worth in 10 years, and then it's like the difference. So their salary is still above market rate, but they're just essentially getting paid in equity. So there's a lot of good resources out there, but do that if they're an early employee, but be generous with it. They're early. Your company is still an idea at this point. I would also say, if they're going to be in equity, get as close to 50-50 as you can, but make sure incentives are aligned. So if you put money in and you're going to feel weird and it's going to cause tension if you're 50-50 because you put money in, don't go 50-50, go somewhat even. What I'd recommend is 50-50, but you take all the money you've given him and it's a loan you've given to the company or something like that. So eventually you'll get it back, like somewhere to incentivize yourself. Also, one thing to work out is if this person's going to continue to get paid and you're not going to get paid, work that out into the equity as well, So maybe go 40-40 and then you've got 20% there where you're going to earn that equity because you're taking a salary sacrifice. But be generous. If they're a co-founder material, bring them on, give them a good chunk, and go as evenish as possible where everyone still feels incentivized and fairly incentivized as well, where I feel like we're both getting the right amount out of this.
I think I completely agree. It strikes me like the most and you said this line, like, feel free to throw around equity. If you want to hear of like a very crafty use of equity, not necessarily a tech startup, but I met with the founder of a supplement business, and they gave away about 5% all up to buyers at major grocery chains to buy their product, literally.
That's awesome.
Like, that is the epitome of like, and within 2 years they've exited for tens of millions of dollars.
Wow.
So it worked out, right? And if they never got into those stores, they wouldn't have got the PE acquisition and all those things. So be crafty with your equity. It's one of the few incentives you have, and also you exist in a land right now where maybe you haven't got raised around. There's no valuation, and even if there is, the upside is so massive, you can sell them on the vision and the dream.
Yeah, definitely. I also just remember that everyone that you give equity to should be on a vesting schedule. So if this person doesn't work out, in 6 months' time they change, you get all that equity back anyway. And so I would just, just remember that you've got flexibility in equity and how it gets used. And equity is there to keep people incentivized long term, which is why there's a vesting schedule, and they earn it over time. But one thing that you did say, Tanmay, is that put advisors on vesting schedules too. We've had advisors that were really good for a little bit, but then they stopped being good, so we stopped vesting their equity. So vesting is there because it's not just I'm giving away 2% now. It's like I'm giving away 2% over the next 5 years or 4 years or whatever it's going to be. So just be careful and use the right mechanisms to protect yourself. Absolutely. But yeah, give the equity, bring someone on. I would hate to do a business by myself. I would have absolutely quit 10,000 times already. I couldn't do it. I need co-founders. I need people to lift me up when I'm down. I need to lift people up when they're down, that you become a team. So I would bring someone on as early as I could for me personally.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. You've been advised, G-Man. All right. I actually think, all right, we'll do one last one. We'll do one last one really quickly though, because I think we're coming up to our end point here. So this third question is called, how do you launch a new feature? A few features are critical to the products and promoting or releasing them to the right audience, and that can be important. The most common pattern I see is announcing a feature on socials and sending users an email. Are there any other ways or interesting methods you have seen or used to announce your feature? What are some strategies to actually effectively launch a feature? This one's from Hey Yogini.
Wow.
I thought this was a pretty good technical question, for a product manager and a product lead. And I reckon you'd have a lot more, experience doing this at those huge FANG players.
Yeah. Every company has its own playbook. So I'm going to start with the worst answer, which is it depends. But we'll get into some more tactical things. So the first things first is it's easiest to launch and communicate the value of a new feature to your customer in a way that they're already used to receiving that value. So if you market and post to your socials, if you email them, if you do things on TikTok, or you text them, or you put an in-app message, these are 1,000,001 ways to communicate changes, updates to your users. But you can't actually do anything brand new unless they're ready to receive that value, because otherwise they'll just miss it and ignore it, right? So you've got to be very, very careful and thoughtful about how are you already communicating to your customers, and where do your customers or users are already used to getting communicating with you. The second thing to understand is what are you aiming to do with this feature? Is this feature designed for, and it really depends on B2B and B2C, but is it designed for a certain subset of people? Is this maybe for, if you're a B2B product, this could be for admins, maybe you should just communicate to admins. There's a very different go-to-market approach based on who it's really there for. So have a think about how do you already communicate? Who are you trying to really communicate to? Because these are really, really critical things. And this is going to be a great segue to point 3 is launching is not everything, right? You have to think about what comes after. So one of the frameworks, Google has HEART. I can't remember the acronym. At Canva, we picked something up from Reforge that we used a bit, which was called TARS. And these are different ways to evaluate the success of a product or a feature launch. Particularly if you think about Canva as a product, we're a very integrated product. A lot of the features that we launch kind of sit within a suite of products. And so you want to somehow understand, okay, this one little thing that we did there, how did this succeed, right? And so in Canva, we had used TARS, which was target, adoption, retention, and satisfaction. So we would first define what percentage of Canva MAU or pro users what's our percentage target? What percentage of them adopt, so use it once? What's their retention based on the natural frequency of what we wanted to kind of get? And then finally, what's the satisfaction? And that was more of a qualitative thing. And what that really helps you understand is the success of a feature. Because what can often happen is if you just launch it on socials, you get a bunch of what I like to call looky-loo users. They'll come through, they'll squint at it, they'll take a look, and then they'll really, really disappear. And so this is going to really help you build that product muscle. At Amazon, we had a crazy metric called DSI OPS, which is downstream impact OPS, or downstream impact revenue. which helped
Wow.
us understand that for each incremental action on site, how much revenue will that drive in 3, 6, 12 months? Because revenue is kind of the main metric. And we had like log OPS and a few other things, and we would A/B test that pretty extensively. So don't just think about launching, really also think about like how can I drive the success? Because sometimes, and this happens very often, you do a launch, things don't necessarily pan out the way you want it to. So then you go, but you've got this great feeder mechanism, so you can always relaunch the product yet again. And you can relaunch it maybe with a different positioning, a different marketing, maybe a slightly different feature mix. And suddenly you've got a very, very different piece of work. So at Canva, we were trying to launch video features for a while. This is before we had a full-fledged video editor. Not successful. And what ended up working for us is when we packaged those video features into templates, because people use templates left, right, and center of Canva. And suddenly, like all our TARS metrics were great because suddenly we weren't necessarily talking about the features and how you apply them to your design. They were baked into something really simple, and you got to sort of receive the value of those features in a matter of seconds. And so, yeah, the first thing is how do you communicate to users? Who's this kind of really, really defined for? And then finally, think about how you really evaluate the success of this feature. And I would almost over-index on number 3 more than the first two.
Yeah, I love that, man. That's I think it's an interesting way to think about the question, which is not how do you launch a feature, because launching a feature is so dependent on everything you mentioned. Who is it for? What does your business do? What is the outcome of this feature meant to be? So I love the idea that start, with everything in startup, start with the end in mind. And when you're launching a feature, you make a really good point, which is that that's not the end of it. Just because engineering builds it doesn't mean that you've improved your product. So you should have spoken to your users. You should have worked out, what your hypotheses are, but work out what the purpose of this is and what success is going to look like. And you should actually use that to define how you launch that more effectively. So, we launch in a whole manner of ways. Sometimes we just put stuff straight into the platform. If it's a new feature within our chat, it just goes in there. People just work it out because it's like naturally in a highly utilized part of our platform. But sometimes, if there's a new way where we want to help our mentors do a new action in the platform, because that's going to see like a lot of different change potentially, we actually don't even necessarily go to the mentors. We work with colleges directly, so we go straight to the college and the people that train the mentors, and we train them on it because they're the ones who are going to be training the mentors. So, there's so many different ways. You've got to work out what is this feature for and then go through it. When you're selling enterprise contracts like we do, that's one way to do it. You don't necessarily need to launch everything. We can do it, but the branding that we're going with is the university's branding. So we go to universities and the colleges and we have it rolled out there. So I think this person, hey Yogini, it's so dependent on your kind of business. But the things that I think work out what it's for and then launch so you achieve the most best version of that. If it's about people engaging in a certain way, work out how they think about it, get them in the moment, like tell them about it when they need it. And then also think about just different ways that you can get access to your users as well. Because it's not always through your platform, it's not always through socials. What are your channel partnerships? Who do you sell to? Who's your economic buyer? And just think about different ways that you can get access as well. And for us, that's often through our, the people we sell to, which is a university, and we use their channels too. But yeah, more than anything, do what Tanmay said. Launching's not the end of it. Think about very much what the feature is for and what success looks like, and then measure that. And your implementation of the feature is really important. How you launch it is really key. And I'm glad someone's thinking about this because, for a long time, we just built something, released it, and we're like, done. But it's just, that misses the whole point. You end up with this big, weird Frankenstein of a platform with a heap of shit that doesn't work in it. So keep launching, measuring, and cutting the shit that you don't need.
Yeah, that's I like those B2B examples because I've traditionally come from a B2C background where it's a little bit more straightforward and it's more of a marketing positioning game. But yeah, if you're a B2B product, think about your channel partners. Think about like how do you go and implement the product in your team. My wife comes from a hardcore enterprise SaaS world. And so, sometimes you don't even actually really launch something. Sometimes you launch things via a conference just for your partners or a dinner for your partners. And then your partners go and teach their like training teams, and those training teams go and implement it and educate the training team within the company who's the end user. So you've almost got like 4 or 5 steps removed, and that's just the name of the game. So yeah, that's a really good point. Like you have to think about like how are you communicating to users again, and like how do you kind of go through it? And it doesn't make sense often to just launch it on your own socials.
Yeah. People aren't looking at socials and just being like, wow, I'm so excited for GIFs in the platform now. That's not going to drive the engagement that you want.
No.
Awesome, man. Well, look, let's wrap that one up. Hey Yogini, do as I say. That's your advice now. Go action that one. And that brings us to the last segment of the show, plugs. So this is everyone's favorite. Tell us, Tanmay, what's going on, man? Where can people follow you? What do you want people to do? What do you want to recommend?
Yeah, so I've got a couple of different places you can follow me on socials, like LinkedIn and Twitter, and I think Joel, you're going to throw that in the show notes, so please go and follow me there. A little plug for Quokka. If you're looking for something, Joel touched upon our chatbot that we've put together in WhatsApp. All you have to go to is ask.quokka.io. We'll also throw that in the show notes. And my other really big plug is I've been reading a really great book. I forgot it. I recommended it to you, Joel. What was it? How to Fundraise? How to be smarter than your lawyer and your banker.
Venture Deals.
Venture Deals, that's right. Amazing book. Completely shifted the paradigm of how you think about fundraising. Completely breaks down who you're meant to talk to. There's a lot of fundraising books out there. This is by far the best one. Venture Deals, go and have a read if you're trying to fundraise, especially in this market. I think this really helps you understand how to go about it, who are the players, who are the movers and shakers. Because if you're a first-time founder, you're sitting opposite from someone who probably has seen 100 deals being made, and this is your first one, and this really, really matters to you. So you need to kind of fix that information asymmetry ASAP. Yeah.
I talk about that book a lot. We had it recommended as well yesterday in one of our questions. So definitely get that, Venture Deals. It's a great book. Also, Tanmay's got a blog. He releases articles. Yes. I will put some links because I love those articles too. So, he shares a lot of advice and a lot of the learnings that he took at those huge plays and how he's applying that to the startup world, which I love. And then my plugs on my side, as always, and I'll say this every single time, get your phone out, like and subscribe, go in there, 5 stars, all the different platforms, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, rate them on all of them. We love it. Then get your friends' phones, your family's phones, rate them on their phones as well. We love that too. If you do that, send me a screenshot and we'll shout you out. If you've rated on someone else's phone, I love it. And then thank you to everyone who writes these questions in. We really love the questions. Keep sending them in. Send them through to podcast@joelditrapani.com. And lastly, I love having conversations about this. Tanmay and I actually first connected by just having these kind of conversations. So if you've got product challenges that you want to talk about, book some time in my calendar. I've got a booking link as well. So, book some time in. I love meeting new people. Let's have a conversation about what's going on in your business and in your world. So we're going to wrap this one up. Tanmay, thank you so much for coming on today. I love to laugh together and to argue together. And I think people will really take a lot out of this one. This has been another episode of the Do As I Say, Not As I Did podcast. We'll see everyone next week.